Hey everybody, my name is Adi Meyerson. I'm a bassist, composer, songwriter, arranger, and today I'm going to be talking about how to self-release a record. So before you even get into the studio and play the music, there are some things that I think it's important to take note of. And it will save you time, it will save you money, and it will save you energy. So the first thing that I want to touch upon is just getting ready to record the record. What is the record? What are we presenting? Conceptualize the project. Is it just a collection of songs that you like and you want to play and present? Is it does it have a storyline? Does it have some kind of thing that ties all of the songs together? Just whatever it is, as long as it is important to you and it tells your story and you feel strongly about it. It's fine. It can be whatever. But that also helps later on in marketing and when we're promoting the album and selling the album to have a strong story behind the album, no matter what it is very helpful. The second thing is getting all the material together. So getting all the songs together, figuring out which songs you want to play. It can be, you can have extra songs, you can have a little bit of songs, and in that process, also thinking about how many songs you want to do. How long do you want this album to be? When you're getting the material, think about, do these songs fit together? Are they all in the same key? Are they all in the same tempo? Are they all the same vibe, the same groove? Do I have enough variety? Do I need variety? Am I making an album that's supposed to sound very cohesive in that sense where what's making it cohesive is all the songs are the same groove or the same kind of tempo, like a ballads album or something like that? Or do I want a little bit more variety and have it kind of flow a certain way? So again, these things don't need to be decided right away, but just having it in the back of your mind and thinking about it and having options and having a list is kind of helpful before going into the studio. Now, assuming the band is going to have a rehearsal, you can also record the rehearsal, run down the rehearsal, try things. That's the time to try things and move things around. So that's about the music itself. Now, the third thing might seem a little bit obvious, but is just having an understanding of the smallest little technical things. So, for example, figuring out how long your record is going to be, doing the research, looking online and figuring out, okay, what are people putting out right now? How long is this album? What's the average length of a jazz record? Or what's the average length of whatever kind of record you're putting out? Also thinking about physical distribution. If you want to put it out on vinyl, for example, that a vinyl record only fits a certain amount of music in it because of its technical, the way it's pressed, the way it's made. So thinking about that. And thinking about really how long each song is going to be. And you can divide it up as long as you want, but just figure it out and have an understanding of it. So you don't show up to the studio and all of a sudden you have a 15-minute song and then a bunch of 3-minute songs, or everything's too long or everything's too short. And just realizing like, okay, this is something that if I plan ahead, and it doesn't have to be like a formula that you stick to, like, oh no, if it's over 5 minutes, we cut it. But just kind of time it in rehearsal, see if it feels too long, if it feels too short, what the actual minute count is, and then in the studio, kind of stick to that, or if it feels a certain way, change it up in the studio too. But just having that general idea of this record should be about X amount of minutes is really helpful going in before recording the music. The last thing I want to talk about in this section of things that we do before recording is really doing proper research about the physical space you're recording in, where you're recording. Listening, depending on what city you're at, how many studios you have. If you have just one studio, cool. If you live in a city like New York City where you have a multitude of studios and a lot to choose from, awesome. Do your research, check out the studio, check out the space, check out some records that were recorded in current times in those studios using the technology that you're probably going to use today. So a record that was recorded in a studio in the 1960s isn't necessarily going to sound the same if it was recorded in 2022 in the same studio, just because we're not in the 60s. But doing some research about what equipment the studio has, communicating with your bandmates of maybe what they like, communicating with your piano player, with your drummer, horn players about microphones. A lot of people that have done this a lot have specific preferences than things that they like. And it's very helpful to know that ahead of time. Also take into consideration the space you're recording in. Spaces sound different. And think about the sound you're going for your record. Certain spaces may have higher ceilings that may create like a certain sound, or lower ceilings. Thinking about, do you want everybody in the same room? Do you want things to be in booths? Do you want more separation, less separation? And having someone that can be like a producer or a friend or someone you trust to bounce these ideas off of is also very helpful before going in. So today's the day, today's the big day. We're in the studio, we're making the record, we're finally recording the music that we prepared. But to make our jobs as band leaders easier, here are a few things that I think can be really helpful. Now, when you're a band leader, usually you're also part of the band. So you have a million things to think of on the administrative side, but also you're thinking about the music and how to make the music better and how you want the music to sound. So just having a little bit of prep, having a little bit of these like little things can really help. I guess the first thing kind of ties back to the last point of having another person in the studio, either it can be a producer or just like a friend or an assistant or somebody that you trust that can kind of be an extra set of ears, whether it's on the musical side of things, like listening, having a second opinion about the music, or if it's on the like organizational, administrative side of things, like taking care of the band's lunch or giving you a timestamp, being like, hey, it's 2:00, we have 4 more hours. Things like that kind of can get lost when you're really deep in the music. So just having another person there can be really helpful. And again, make sure it's someone you trust and someone that will not distract you, but just add to the process. Now, while we're in the studio, we can't think of everything all at once, right? We're humans. We got to play the music, but also we want to make sure the takes are good and things are going well. And if there's, sometimes you're playing and you remember something while you're playing. So having a little notebook or being able to take notes while you're in the booth or in the studio is really, really helpful. So just writing down the name of the song and whatever you heard that you want to fix or you want to do again, or something that made you whatever. It could be whatever. But just having that to come back to later is really, really helpful. Or if there is a producer or somebody in the room, you can also feel free to ask them to do that for you. That can be their job as well. But just having that in the moment, being able to be like, okay, this is, and then come back to it later is really, really great. And again, saves time. So also, let's see. Yes, that is the second thing. Another thing is don't spend too much time listening back to the recordings you just made. Now, sometimes it's a full day, it's a long day. Sometimes it's 2 days. Sometimes it's more chill. But be really intentional with listening. When you come back to the booth and you listen, what are you listening for? Are we listening for sound? Are we listening for mic placements? Are we listening to make sure things sound the way we want them to sound? Look at your notes, and if there's things that you wrote down, oh, this messed up, this needs to be fixed, or I want to listen to this section, just be like really intentional and specific about that. That saves time, and it helps the engineer, it helps the band, it helps the band leader, and also it doesn't totally take away from the flow of the music. So like coming in, because playing a song and then sitting down for 8 minutes and listening to the song and playing another song, like that's just a lot of back and forth. So sometimes it's just easier to flow and be into it and just play, and then come back and listen later, or listen on the break if you want to take notes of like a full song or feel certain things. So just being intentional with the listening process. And also sometimes you only have one day, so to try to get everything done in one day takes a lot of time. And of course we need to check back on ourselves and everything, but just being able to manage your time in that way is important. And that leads me to my last point, which is remember to take breaks and to check in with your bandmates. We're all human beings at the end of the day. If you're going to be in the studio for 12 hours, different instruments require different kind of endurance. So if you play an instrument where you're sitting down the whole time, maybe you need to get up and stretch if you're playing an instrument, or if your bandmate's playing an instrument like a trumpet or a bass that requires standing up, or chops, just check in, make sure everything's good, everybody's happy. If people need to take 5 minutes, take 5 minutes. Make sure to factor in time to eat. Food is very important. This sounds silly, but food is very important. Food and water. You know, make sure people get cranky when they don't eat. You get cranky when you don't eat, maybe. I know I get cranky when I don't eat. It's harder for me to think when I don't eat. So sometimes when you're in a workflow, you can go 5-6 hours and then you start getting frustrated and realize, why am I frustrated? Nothing's happening. Nothing sounds the way I want to sound. And then realize, oh, it's, 3 o'clock and nobody's eaten since 9 a.m. So just having that factored into your schedule is really important. And especially if you're going into the studio for the first time and you really haven't done a lot of these and haven't experienced this a lot, just little things. And again, circling back to the first thing we said, having another person in there to help you deal with that, to make sure they order the food for the band, to make sure everything is taken care of, takes a lot of weight off of the band leader's shoulders and helps them just focus on the music. We will fix it in post. I feel like any person who's ever heard that phrase will either have the little eye roll emoji reaction to it or the little cringy face. Or, don't fix it in post. It's one of the most common phrases that I hear get thrown around, and if you can fix it before post, if you can fix it in the studio, if you can fix it in pre, fix it in pre, take care of it. Take care of it might be just a little thing of like running one little thing again, but it makes the job when you're actually doing the post-production a lot easier. If it's like a mic placement or just like a little punch-in that you want to do, or just a few little things that just, can be avoided, because sitting and trying to mix and fix tiny little things just because they weren't recorded properly is really tedious and takes a lot of time and money, and we don't want to be in that position. Now, what is post? Post-production. To me, post means the mixing, the mastering, figuring out the album order, all those things that come in before the music gets released. But it's already been recorded, right? Music's already been recorded. We did our day, we did it in the studio, it's done. Now we come back to it. I personally like to take a little bit of time between when I recorded the music to when I start mixing. Now, that's a personal preference. Some people like to do it right away. Some people are on a deadline. Either way is fine. My personal preference is to do that because it gives me a little bit of time to emotionally disconnect from how I felt in the studio about the music and kind of listen to it in a more objective, new perspective. So sometimes in the studio you'll feel like, oh, that take really sucked. I played horribly on that take. And then a month later you come back and listen to it and it sounds great. All these little things you were insecure about in the studio don't even show up on the recording. And it ends up being the take you use. So, just having that neutral space to neutralize your emotions about your personal performance the day of can be really helpful. Finding a good mixing and mastering engineer that you trust, that you like their work is really important. Someone who you feel comfortable, who you can communicate with. You don't have to be an expert on mixing. Mixing is a very vague thing for a lot of people. So if it sounds really overwhelming and vague to you, that's okay. Getting someone in there, another set of ears that can help you and that has more experience that can help you and guide you can also be nice. maybe that same producer from the record session. But a lot of the times, engineers communicate with the artists in ways you don't need to be an audio engineer to communicate with your engineer. The way we can communicate with each other a lot of the times is a lot more vague, and it can be like using words like bright, dark, forward, backwards, things like that. And to them, they'll know what to do when you say, I want to bring the saxophone forward a little bit in the mix, versus I want the drums to feel a little bit backward, or I want the song to feel a little darker in its feel. Things like that may sound a little weird, but they're actually really valid. And also listening to records that you like and bringing in references can be really helpful for some people. So when you're mixing, you're doing that. Again, there's certain things that can be fixed, certain things that can be edited. It's also can be a personal choice how much edits and things you want to put in there. But the studio is definitely magical, and a lot of things can be done. So just keep in mind that all these things, again, take time, and they're probably you're gonna have to go in and listen back and do it multiple times. Like do it, come in, take a break from it, listen back, write notes, take notes. I don't like this, I like this. Let's try this, let's do this. Come back. It's horrible. Let's do it all over again. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but sometimes it happens, or it's great, I love it, let's move on. But just being really intentional with your listening and prepare for a little bit of back and forth. Now, another thing that I like to do, and I think is important, is listen to your mixes on every kind of speaker possible. This is the year of 2022. We consume music in multiple different ways, in different kinds of things. A lot of people consume music through their phone speakers or their laptop speakers. A lot of people listen to them on headphones. Sometimes you listen to them in car speakers. Some people have like a really high fidelity system at home. But I think being able to take your mixes and try them out on multiple different kinds of speakers is really, really important. And if it sounds good on the worst audio possible, on the worst headphones possible, through phone speakers, if it still sounds clear, if it still sounds good, if you can still hear all their instruments, if it still sounds the way you want it to sound, then you're good. Because not everyone's gonna have nice headphones to listen to for those tiny, tiny little details that you're gonna put so much effort into putting into. So just keep that in mind. How do people listen to your music? And then album order. Think about the flow of the album. What's the first song? What's the last song? What's the middle? How do you want to order it? How many songs are actually going to make the album? I like to think of it as an actual vinyl, as a record, where you have a side A and then you flip it and you have a side B. So kind of dividing it into two and thinking of like, what's the first track of side A? How do I end side A? What's the first track of side B? How do I end it? What's going to fit in the middle? Some people might not listen to the whole thing from top to bottom. Some people might. If you have some cool transitions between songs, that's always fun, and really like shows you who's really listened to the whole album in the order that you intended. So just thinking about that, and be intentional with it. And once the mixing's done, mastering's done, you feel good about the music. It's hard, that's it, it's ready. It's kind of hard to go back, once it's been mastered, to go back and submitted, to go back and change your mind about certain things. So really take your time with that. I like to send it out to friends that I trust a lot too, and trust their ears, and ask for their opinions, and if they have any notes. I think there's a lot of power in that, in the community, and being able to get opinions of people you trust with something that's so dear to you that you put a lot of effort into. You made a record. Congratulations. You recorded the music, you mixed it, you mastered it, you have a finished product. Now, how do we get people to hear it? What do we do? So the first thing we gotta remember is that in the year of 2022, most people consume their music on the internet through some kind of streaming service. And when we're talking about distribution, we're talking mainly about digital distribution and not physical distribution. What even is distribution? It is a way to get your music out there. And if you're releasing your music independently, meaning without a label helping you do all these things, you can do it through certain websites on the internet that are built for that. They are digital distributors, and their job is to take your ready music and send it out to all these places. So they take it and they send it to Spotify, they send it to Apple Music, to Tidal, they make sure it gets on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube, whatever their each website is different. Each website has a list of places they will distribute your music to, and that's how it gets sent to the masses. Now, it is very important, and this connects to the next points I'm going to talk about, but it is extremely, extremely important to leave enough time between when the record is done to when you want your release date to be. People used to say 3 months. I think 6 months in advance is very helpful. Everybody's a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit busy. I think a lot of musicians made a lot of music during the pandemic and during the time that we've been in our homes for a long time. And just in general, it's better to leave more time than less time, because that way if something goes wrong or if there's some kind of issue that needs to be fixed, you have plenty of time to fix it, and it doesn't put your schedule in, it doesn't compromise your schedule or put you behind or anything. So distribution, digital distribution, that's how you get your music out there. We also got to make sure we leave enough time for marketing and spreading the word about the music, because how are people going to know? A very important figure and person and job that I think is worth putting the money into is a publicist, and a good publicist that you trust, that other people trust, that promotes projects that your project fits with. So stylistically, they know your style of music. Their connections are connections that will be happy to share your music because it fits what they're curating. So, if you're putting out a jazz album, going to a pop publicist wouldn't necessarily be the smartest thing. But what a publicist really does is they tell other people that work in press about your album and basically get the word out. So they pitch your project for you. They pitch it to media outlets to try to get coverage. So instead of you going and doing the research and emailing people and being like, hey, listen to my record, you're paying someone to do that for you, and someone that has already established those connections in a professional way. So I personally think it's worth it. Now, it's kind of a gamble because you never know. The publicist can't promise you that a certain media outlet will take interest in your record. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people, and we don't know why and we don't know how, but certain things don't get picked up and certain things do get picked up. But it's a gamble, but I think it pays off, because even if it's just one media outlet, and you never know what it's going to lead to. So again, also publicist schedules are very busy. So if you reach out to the publicist more time in advance, they are more likely to have time to take your project and put the right amount of effort into it. And so what they do is they'll write you a press release, and they'll get you a little press get together and, make sure that it looks professional, it looks good, and it looks presentable to people and will pique people's interests. Now, in the first section, we talked about having a concept and having a story. And that kind of ties back to this part. So when you have this album, you have a name, you have a cover, you have great photos to go with it. What's the story? What's the concept? What's the story behind the album? What do we need to know about you? So while working with a publicist, these are things that will come up. And if you kind of came into this process with an idea before that, or some kind of narrative before that, then it's very helpful. Now again, you don't have to have one, but just being able to talk about the project and be personal about it is a narrative in itself. So we're trying to convince people that our music is worth listening to from a pool of different musicians, different music, something they may have never heard of us, but why we need to convince them why our album is worth their time and their energy, and our album will make them, change their life. So having some kind of personal connection, personal story is really nice and really helpful, and I think is important. And all of this ties into this giant word that I keep saying called marketing, right? Marketing, selling something to somebody. At the end of the day, this is something you want to share with people, you want it to reach people, you want to sell it to people. This is your job, this is your profession, so there's going to be some kind of revenue, whether it's using the album to get live shows or having people buy it, having people give you, other opportunities. You never know what's going to happen. But having people like a publicist on to help you with marketing, to help you spread the word, is always recommended. And then, you are an artist, but you are also, in this day and age, kind of like the face of your brand. And what does that mean? Like, how do you present yourself? So having photos that, present your personality and look great, or are high quality and are eye-catching is cool to have that. Being able to talk about your music and your art, having some kind of content that goes with it, like videos, or just, we said photos, but maybe like live footage from the studio, or just anything, interviews of you talking about it, anything that is done on a high level and is professional and is relatable, I think is valid for that. A lot of people use social media for marketing. If you use a publicist, like I said, you will get some kind of media outlets to cover your music for marketing. There's ways to, push your music to audiences that you've never heard, that have never heard of you before, through maybe paid ads on social media. There's multiple ways to do it. You can even hire someone to help you with it. There's so many ways to do it, but I think just keeping in mind that this is a thing that needs to be considered. And you want people to hear this music. And thinking about what's the best way for you to market this album. And a big thing about that is, what's your target audience to begin with? Who are you even marketing this music to? Who's buying the album? Who's listening to it? All of the softwares have these data, it will analyze your data and tell you who's listening, who's watching, who's interacting, who's buying it. And I think that's really cool and cool information, because if you know who you're marketing it towards, I think you have a better opportunity to get those people's attention. So we made the record, we talked about marketing and distributing the music and how to get the music out there and leaving enough time. But another thing that needs to be touched on, especially when you're doing this on your own, is who owns the rights to your music. Now, if you're a composer, arranger, whatever, if you decided to record your own music, if you decided to record somebody else's music but do your own arrangement of it, the ownership distribution, it changes, and it depends on a lot of things. So as a composer, you own a certain amount of the royalties to any song that is being played. You own 100% of those compositional rights if you're the sole composer of the song. How do you know, how does the general public know who owns it? And how does the companies know who to give the money to? So you, as an artist and as a composer, have to register at one of these music collecting, royalty collecting websites. So the most popular ones are ASCAP and BMI. Anyone can register to ASCAP and BMI. You just go online, you create an account, you follow the instructions, and they give you, I think you have to spend a certain amount of money to sign up, but they give you a name, an account, and what they do for you is they collect royalties for you. Now, if you sign up as a composer, they will collect royalties for your composition. So anytime somebody plays your composition, even if you're not playing it or records your composition, they will collect those royalties and send them to you. Now, publishing is another thing, which is, again, can be a very vague term, but publishing is, when we're talking about royalties, is also something that needs to be addressed, because just because you wrote the music doesn't mean you own the publishing. If you have somebody else putting out your music, they might cut a deal with you or to own some of your publishing, meaning they're collecting some of these royalties for you. So as an independent artist doing everything yourself, you want to make sure you own your publishing. And with ASCAP and BMI, you can also create a publishing account or publishing company. Sometimes they go together, sometimes you have to do them separately. And what ends up happening with that is that you collect 50% of the royalties as the artist and then 50% of the royalties as the composer publisher. And that way you get the maximum amount of your royalties. As an artist, as someone who owns the master recording, meaning you own the actual song, the actual recording soundbite of the song. That means that you own your masters, and there's another set of royalties you can collect for that. So it's just really important to get all of this information together. It seems like a lot, but there's a lot of resources online that you can go check out. There's also people that can help, like publishing companies or distribution people that, help independent artists do this, so that you're still releasing without a label, but you're getting some music business help to make sure you own all your songs and you own everything and you get that part of the business right.
Get your money right.
Get your money right. Money. I need some dollars.
That's right.
Dollar bills to
That's
flash.
right.
Okay. Anyway, so all the stuff we talked about, all this music, unfortunately, in this world, it's not possible without money, right? You can't do anything without money. All these things are expensive. They cost money. People's time costs money. People's energy costs money. And we got to figure out how to do that. So the first thing we got to do to figure out how to do that is really understand how much money we're talking about. Create a budget, write it down, see how much the studio is going to cost, people's fees, budget extra headspace like for things like food and taxis and little things. But really be really, really thorough with it, because the more specific you are, the better you will be at being able to come up with that money in various ways. So really getting your budget together. So there are multiple ways how you can fund your record. The money has to come from somewhere. So one way is to save up the money, or have the money, pay for it yourself, which is great if you can do that. Another way to fund a record is through crowdsourcing, crowdfunding. There's plenty of platforms on the internet, and being able, to give people certain kinds of perks in exchange for the money that they're paying, kind of like a situation where they're pre-buying the album, so they're fronting the money for you to make the album. There's a third way, and that's grant money. And every city, every country, every place has different resources. But doing the research and understanding what your city or your country or your state or wherever you're at, what kind of resources they have for artists, and applying for grants. So applying for funding for your project is really cool. I funded an album doing that, applying for a grant and getting the money for it. To do that, it's very much hit or miss. You never really know what they're looking for, but doing the research again and understanding their criterias and being able to present your project in the clearest way is really important. So having a budget, having a clear story of what the project is and what it is they're giving the money for is something that's very helpful when you're applying for grants. But just, there's plenty of money out there, plenty of opportunities, plenty of people that want to fund the arts. It's just a matter of doing the work and putting the effort in and continuously applying to get funding for it. So whichever way you end up funding it, it's all good. Every way is valid and every way is great. But just remember, all these things cost money, and there's certain ways to do it and different ways to do it, and places where you can maybe cut corners and other places where you probably shouldn't cut corners, like recording costs and things that, you know, are going to end up costing you more money trying to fix. So these are just a lot of things to keep in mind when you're making an album. Before you make an album, put it together. It's not an easy task, but it's very rewarding. And to, you know, go in to a studio and come out with a project, come out with something that tells your story and helps you express who you are as an artist is such a beautiful thing. And we're always going to need music, so don't get discouraged and keep making art. Thank you so much for hanging out, for coming to my class. I hope some of this information was helpful and can help you with your planning of your record and your independent release. Had a great time, and I hope to see you soon.